I'm going to give you the 4 rules to selling that will never steer you wrong if you're in a B2B pre-product market fit environment. You can apply the playbooks for more mature organizations, but that's going to give you a set of massive problems that you have to deal with. Now, if you run those playbooks, you still might win, but you're not going to know why your customers were buying. You're not going to know which problems was urgent enough to create action from those customers. You're not going to know which buyer actually owned the problem. You're not going to know why some prospects leaned forward during the demo while others went completely flat. What you've done by using those playbooks, the ones that are designed for organizations that are 5 steps ahead of you, is that you've created a more efficient process for moving people through a funnel, but you haven't created a better process for understanding why they're moving through the funnel the way that they are. That's one of the biggest traps for founders. If you're in that pre-product market fit stage, you start optimizing for a sales process before you've even learned or earned the right to optimize it. Put it simply, you have no idea why things are happening the way that they're happening. And at that stage, your job isn't to protect your calendar. It isn't to see how quickly you can get to a deal or how you need to qualify people out as quickly as possible. Your job at that stage is to get access to what's actually the truth. You need to understand what buyers care about, how they describe the problem, where it sits on their priority list, who feels the impact of it, who controls the budget, and whether your product actually lines up with the problem that they're actually trying to solve. That's what founder-led sales is supposed to do before product market fit. It's a learning process. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through the 4 rules that I've applied and I believe early stage founders need to follow if they want to use sales to build clarity, create traction, and move closer to product market fit. If that's the stage that you're in right now, you need to subscribe to this channel. Everything I cover here is built for founders trying to move from 0 to 1 to growth to traction without copying a GTM playbook from a company that's 5 stages ahead of you. Now, I've built multi-million-dollar pipelines and generated millions of dollars in revenue in the ed tech space, the HR tech space, TA tech, IT staffing, and executive coaching. And I've applied these 4 rules to the selling process. I've taken companies from 0 to 1 to growth to traction, and my career has been spent in building something from nothing without investor funding and by being scrappy AF. And in this episode, I'm going to go over those 4 rules and how you can apply it within your organization. So rule number 1, you have to go outbound. That rule is simple, and you'll have a lot of organizations that are further along in their development saying that the goal for you is to not go outbound. The goal for you is to make sure that you have inbound leads as a way to get deals. If you're pre-product market fit, unless you are selling a product that somebody can buy with a credit card, there's no way around it. You have to go outbound. And that rule is really simple. You're going to hear that and you're going to cringe. Because I know outbound is brutal right now. All of your buyers are buried in cold emails, LinkedIn DMs, AI-generated personalization, automated follow-ups, and pitch after pitch from companies that all sound exactly the same. And response rates are terrible. Most buyers can recognize fake personalized messages before they finish reading the first sentence. So you're probably sitting there thinking this is a dead end. The problem isn't the channel. The problem's how founders are using that channel. You need to use an all-hands-on-deck approach, and you need to go outbound. But the problem is a lot of founders treat outbound as a volume game. You build a list, you write a sequence, send thousands of messages, and hope a small percentage of people agree to take a meeting. Now, that approach is weak even when you have product market fit. At your stage, before product market fit, it's dangerous because it gives you activity without necessarily giving you anything beyond meetings on the calendar. It won't put you in a position for you to learn anything. So in the face of all of that, I'm going to stick to my guns. Not going outbound is not an option. Waiting for inbound demand is a luxury that you don't have. And like I said, unless you can buy your product with a credit card, you can't rely on it. You don't have a brand, you don't own a category, you don't have thousands of buyers who are searching for your solution. You're noise and you're a nothing in a sea of nothing. In a lot of ways, the people you want to reach may not even recognize that the problem you solve is something that they're facing right now. So you have to create access. And the real job of outbound before product market fit is to create enough meaningful conversations that you can start identifying patterns. What's the language that gets attention? What's the problems that create urgency? What roles should I be targeting who care enough to respond? What are the trigger events that create urgency? Where are the use cases where your product theory falls apart? And when you ask those questions and when you're looking for those sort of answers, you're not going to be able to get those answers by using the traditional spam your TAM outbound. And that's why I always talk about pairing your outbound with content collaboration as the key pillar. You add content collaboration, research, interviews, events, or some other reason that you're putting in front of your prospective buyer for them to actually talk to you. It's not about doing a demo. Nobody's going to listen to you about that. The fact of the matter is that I've gotten kicked in my face plenty of times doing it the old way. I've talked plenty of times about one of my experiences working for a coaching organization where I executed an existing playbook and did 6,000 pieces of outbound touches and received zero response because all of those outbound touches were informed by the traditional sales playbook that had long stopped working. And it would be one thing if I got a low response. I got zero response, 6,000 pieces of outbound and not a single reply. And that's because that playbook was built in a vacuum and it was filled with internal assumptions and generic value propositions that had never been tested with the market or with actual buyers. And then when I shifted it and started using content collaboration as a way to get access to buyers, that same environment, we were able to generate close to 300 deep dive conversations with senior and executive leaders of HR and HR learning leaders and other people that we thought might be in our ICP. It wasn't the channel that wasn't working. It was how we were using the channel and what we were looking for from a conversation perspective. So instead of using outbound to pitch into the market, I used outbound to create content collaboration, gather insights, build relationships, and understand why buyers behaved the way that they behaved. You can't smile and dial your way to traction, but you also can't sit around and wait for buyers to discover you. You have to go outbound, and every outbound motion should be designed to give you more signal than you had before. Now, what I just described is a pretty brutal outbound stretch. If you've gone through something similar, drop me a comment and let me know how many outbound pieces or outbound touches you had to execute before you got a response. Because I think a lot of people might be operating under the misconception that even a well-honed outbound machine is going to get you solid responses. If you're using the traditional playbook, your outbound responses are going to be pretty low. And I want to make sure that founders are actually tuned into that and why it's important to craft outbound the right way. And it's something that you cannot avoid. So that's rule number one. What's rule number two? This should be pretty standard. If you've seen any of my content, you should know this. Never sell on the first meeting. Now that seems pretty simple, but I want to be clear about why that's important. This isn't some sort of sales technique where you pretend not to sell so the buyer lowers their guard. The reason you don't sell on the first meeting is that you don't understand the problem well enough yet for you to even make any recommendations. At the pre-product market fit stage, your first conversation should be built around discovery. But here's the thing, your entire mindset should be looking at discovery as an ongoing process. What's happening inside the business? What's changed? Why is this problem getting attention now? Who's feeling the pain? What have they already tried? All of those questions are critical for you to understand the problem before you propose a solution. And I want everybody to pay attention to this. Sometimes that solution means it's a completely different product than what you have. And what's amazing is how often founders violate that rule. You spent months building a product. So by the time you finally feel like you're ready to get in front of a prospect, you're so excited that you want to explain it. You ask one or two surface level questions, get happy ears, hear something that sounds familiar, and then you move immediately into the pitch. You're not listening to the customer. You're matching every answer that you might be getting from your prospect to the story that you want to tell. And that's a surefire way for you never to have another conversation with that prospect. And that's why I talk about discovery as a process, because it helps you understand whether the problem is critical, common, urgent, and valuable enough to build a solution around. Sometimes the buyer will describe the problem differently than you do. Sometimes they'll tell you that the problem is real, but it sits at the bottom of a priority list. Sometimes the end user will love the concept, but the executive buyer won't care. Sometimes you're going to learn that the real problem is one step before or one step after the thing that your product currently solves. That's the information that you need to refine your product or refine your messaging. And this approach of discovery as an ongoing process is what I've used in several different occasions to build markets entirely from zero. One example is what I did at Engage Rocket. We entered the US with no customers, no revenue, very little brand recognition, and in a marketplace that was in the people analytics space. It was heavily saturated. But through a content-led motion, we were able to meet with over 200 senior and executive leaders. We created close to 300 opportunities, built more than 300 in qualified pipeline, and were eventually able to pivot from what we thought we were going to be in, HR tech as a product and solution, and pivot into ed tech. And that pivot, informed through the learning that we had, led to 20 customers in the first 12 months. Now, that didn't happen because we had a perfect pitch and a perfect deck. It happened because we treated conversations as a feedback loop, and we learned the ICP on the fly. Everything that we needed to know, the value proposition, the buying triggers, the language, the friction points, that was housed in each of those conversations that helped us make that pivot. We didn't treat discovery as a stage, and we certainly didn't look at these conversations as an opportunity to demo. We wanted to operationalize discovery, and that's how we were able to successfully get a toehold in the marketplace. That's how you turn discovery into a process, and you understand the customer landscape at a deep level, so you're not making guesses on what's important to them. Rule number 3 is going to make you scratch your head a little bit, especially when you consider rule number 2. The third rule is that everyone sees the product. And you might be sitting there thinking, if you don't demo on the first meeting, how does everybody see the product? And this is where I want to add a little nuance. So what happens is that if you're running the old playbook, you're in a qualify in and qualify out mode. And a lot of early stage founders, especially in that pre-product market fit stage, get overly aggressive with qualification. You look at the company, you look at the title, you look at the company size, you look at revenue, you look at all the different things that you've been taught you should look at before you have a conversation. You decide that because this person doesn't fit the criteria exactly of our ICP theory, we're not going to talk to them. And you exclude them before you have ever seen that person react to the product. Now, that makes sense if you've gotten all of your stuff mapped out and you're mature in your GTM motion. At pre-product markets fit stage, you have no idea what's going to track with a potential buyer. You don't have thousands of customers. You don't even have hundreds of customers, and you certainly don't have years of validated buying data. And that's why in the pre-product market fit stage, bouncing people before they've ever seen the product is shooting yourself in the foot. At this stage, you want to have enough conversations to create interest. You want to have enough conversations to build rapport, trust, and credibility. And then you want to make the ask to get some product feedback on what you've already built. So the demo, the act of seeing the product, is a feedback loop. It performs 3 functions. It's a sales tool, it's a learning tool, and it's a product research tool. And if every prospect that you're meeting with isn't offering you insights across all 3 of those areas, it's a missed opportunity. When somebody reacts to the actual product that you show them, you get a level of insight that you'll never get from a theoretical conversation. You can tell which parts of the product matters the most. They can point out where the workflows are breaking down. They can identify missing features that you might not have thought about, and they can tell you what they expected to see. And they can also give you a comparison of what stands out compared to competitors and what's a missing link. They can connect the product to an internal process that you had no visibility to. And there's a bunch of other things that they can expose, but if they never see the product, you don't get any of that. You're back at square one where you're guessing at your product theory in a vacuum. You're letting your ideas define what matters to the market instead of the market telling you what matters. And when you go through this exercise, you get the opportunity to align priorities for each prospect before you start sharing anything on your screen. It allows you to pressure test some of the things that you've heard in earlier conversations and see if that's the right read or not. And you're using each of these sessions and turning them into a working session. You're showing them something, you're asking them something, they're reacting, and you're digging in deeper to that reaction and connecting it to their environment. This is how you create that learning loop, because it's that learning loop that allows you to go from 0 to 1 and continue your trajectory to growth and traction. So the first 3 rules: you have to go outbound, you don't sell on the first meeting, and everyone sees the product. Pretty straightforward. So what's rule number 4? Now I'm going to give you some context. When you're a mature organization and you've figured out what matters to your buyer, you can decide what sort of motion you're in based on the price point of your product. When you're pre-product market fit, you don't have that luxury. You don't know whether you're going the enterprise route, the mid-market route, or the SMB route. You don't know exactly where the right pricing for your product is. You're building all of that stuff on the fly. One of the things that I've often heard a lot of people talk about is that based on what your average deal size is, you should be able to predict how many calls you need to get to the proposal stage. In the pre-product market fit phase, you don't know any of that yet. So the 4th rule is that you don't move into contract discussions until you've had somebody in the room with you who's above the line of the first prospect that you talk to and below the line of the first prospect that you talk to. And the reason why that's important is that you're not going to win by single threading your motion in the pre-product market fit stage. You're not going to do one call closes because you don't know if the person that you're talking to is the right person that owns this problem or owns the budget. The only thing that you can make a guess at is that first person might be a champion. They could be the end user. They may control the budget. There's a lot of things that you need to figure out before you can move to the contract stage. From a B2B perspective, when I'm thinking small ticket item, it's anything that's above 5K and less than 20K. Even in something at that price range, nobody's going to be able to sign off by themselves. It's going to be very rare. And even if they were able to do it, they're not going to do it because budgets are tight and everybody is looking to make sure that they're making the best decision for the moment. And what that means is that multiple people are going to be involved at multiple levels of the organization, even on a spend that ranges between 5K and 20K. There's still going to be other people around. And that's why you need to have somebody above the line and below the line get eyes on the product and be in the same room with your champion at the same time that you're working through this process. Because that's going to allow you to determine who owns the outcome, who controls the budget, who's going to ask why this needs to happen now. You're going to need to know all of those things and landscape the deal. And that all happens at or above the line that you're talking to. Now, below the line, you need to talk to somebody that actually knows how the work is done. What's the user experience going to be? What's going to be needed to change their behavior? What's the pain that they're experiencing every day? What's going to kill the adoption after the agreement's been signed? You need both sets of those perspectives as well as the perspective of your first contact, your champion, to get a view of what's going on within the organization and how you can position your solution to be the right solution for right now. And until you have all of that, you're just making guesses on how things get done and why something closed. It's very rare in this environment, unless you're truly presenting a product that somebody can purchase with their credit card, that a one-call close is a real thing in the B2B space. That doesn't mean that you can't close it in a single call, but turning that into an operating rule at this stage of your development is a surefire way to make sure that you stall out deals that probably weren't ready to move to that stage. You need to understand how decisions get made and make sure that you're not fast forwarding things that aren't ready yet. And the key thing to keep in mind and understand why the above the line and below the line rule exists, you're not just trying to drive revenue into your bottom line. You're trying to close the right revenue as well. Because if you get wins, but it's in the wrong segment and those customers churned, you're still back at square one. You're starting all over again. So you need to make sure that you have the right things in order to make sure that you're closing the right sort of deals. Now, that doesn't mean that you turn everything into an enterprise motion, but when you're starting out, you need to have line of sight into as much of the organization as possible so you can plan for slowdowns and sideways turns that you weren't expecting. So when you look at those 4 rules, why do I swear by them? I swear by them because it gives you the best opportunity to present your product, which is still just a little bit more than just a concept, in the best possible light for you to get traction within an organization. Once you've repeated that over and over again, you're going to have wins that stack, and then you can optimize everything for efficiency. But right now, at your stage, you need buyer access, and you need to understand the triggers and factors that are driving decisions and urgency within the organization. That's why it's critical that you need to slow down and adopt these steps so you have full visibility, or as much visibility as possible, in how decisions are made. Now, everything that I talked about is stuff that I've done across multiple industries. And if you're in that 0 to 1 phase, and I qualify that as something where you literally have 0 clients and 0 revenue, all the way up to that $10 million mark, that's the space that I operate with. And that's how I've actually taken organizations in various sectors to different stages in their growth cycle, starting from 0. All of these things work, and especially for the founders that I typically work with who don't come out of sales or who aren't natural sellers, this is the process that you put into place, and these are the rules that you can put into place to make sure that you're building discipline while still being able to run fast and cycle through different customer personas. Part of the object of the exercise is for you to be able to rapidly have meaningful conversations and pivot as you see certain segments wash out. But if you're applying those old playbooks, what are you doing? You're getting very low response rates. You have no predictability on who's responding and why, and you have very little leeway to expand those conversations into future discussions that really tell you where your product is situated. That's why these 4 rules allow you to learn faster and avoid burning the relationships in the process. The key thing I want everybody to understand is that a lot of the conventional wisdom out there says that you need to do more things to get better results. That's simply not true. You need to do better things. And these 4 rules allow you to build a level of precision and have a volume of conversations where you're taking a relationship first approach while still giving you the opportunity to challenge some of the things that you might hear, but also challenge your own assumptions about the product that you built. So what do you think of those 4 rules? Is that something that works for you? What do you disagree with the most? Drop those in the comments. For those of you who like this conversation, make sure you check out this playlist and this episode. I think you'll find those useful as well. I'll drop a new episode every week, usually on a Friday or Saturday, so make sure you check that out and give me a follow if this stuff resonated with you. If you have ideas for topics or questions that you have, drop those in the comments as well, and maybe that might be the basis for a new conversation on a later episode. So thanks for checking out this conversation, and then tune in next week where I'll have another episode that is designed to help you go from 0 to 1 to growth to traction.